Guys, chapter 4 is focusing on structure. Hopefully you've had some info on structure before, maybe in an intro to management class or something like that. But structure is about, how are we going to group things in the organization? What is the shape of the organization going to be like? Is it going to be taller? Is it going to be flatter? Are we going to divide things by function? Are we going to divide things by division or department? How is the power going to be distributed in the organization, and how's the work going to be divided up? What are jobs going to look like? That is also part of structure. And strategy and structure work together, right? If you have the perfect strategy but not the right structure to execute it, that can be a problem. Certain structures are better for certain strategies. So usually we want to think about our strategy first and let that inform how we are going to structure the organization. Structure, however, also influences strategy. It determines how information is processed and acted upon. There is a two-way flow of information, and it affects the way that we look at our environment as well. So it will influence a strategy, just as strategy should influence structure. Okay, so as I was saying, the structure is made up of, how are we going to group people in the organization? How tall and flat is the organization going to be? How centralized is power going to be in the organization? And how are we going to divide up the work among jobs? So why do we make departments? Why do we group things in organizations? This is probably the most important decision that we have to make regards to structure, and it helps us to decide who is going to be supervising what. Usually each department has a manager that oversees the activities of that department or that unit. It usually requires common resources, so maybe the same IT stuff, the same filing systems, the same people, administrators, things like that. It creates common measures of performance, because usually when we group jobs together, they are responsible for a common set of activities or results or achieving a goal. And so that would be the metrics that we would measure them against. And it encourages people to work together. We coordinate more frequently with the people in our department than people across departments. And often, departments or units all work in the same space, so they see each other a lot more frequently. They interact each other, and it encourages coordination within that unit. You feel like you're a group. Now, the problem that can sometimes occur is that other units or departments are seen as other, or an outgroup, or the enemy, and sometimes we don't get as much coordination between those units, which is why processes and lateral coordination are important, and we'll talk about that as the next item in the STAR. So there are various structure options. As we talked about very early on, functional is the simplest and perhaps the oldest structure. It is ideal for organizations that operate in one business. And we divide people by function. So all the marketing people work together, all the IT people work together, all the research and development people work together in functions, okay? As companies get more complex, we tend to move into divisional structures. Your book doesn't clarify this quite as they should, I don't think. They talk about product, geographic, and customer or market structures. Those are all different types of divisional structures. Okay, your book goes over a lot of advantages and disadvantages of these various structures, and you should be aware of those. Okay, so functional structure, decision making is easy, but interdepartmental coordination is not great. And as organizations get more complex, functional structures are generally not appropriate. They don't handle complexity well. They are for simpler, smaller companies with fewer product lines. Product structure, again, this is a type of divisional structure where we divide up the organization by products. That means that we are duplicating functions across these divisions, and that's true for all divisional structures. So as you see your example here, within the auto loan division, we have marketing people. We also have marketing people within the mortgage loan division and within retirement accounts and within consumer banking. So instead of having one marketing department, we have marketing people across each of these divisions. So sometimes we get duplications of work and resources because of that, and we don't always share information between these divisions very well. But within each division, the people who are in there are specializing in that product, and so they know the product really well, they collaborate really well together, and you can make quicker decisions because they have the information and they have the resources they need to do so. Okay, the customer or market structure is divided by types of customers or market segments. It means the same thing, just different language. And so we can understand those markets really well. We can meet our customers' needs really well. But again, you can get resource duplication across the divisions. Geographic structures are organized by location, and so we can, get specialized for the region that we're in. We can have a face that looks like a local company, but again, it can be expensive to duplicate resources across these different divisions. Okay, process structures are a little bit different. These came out in the 80s and 90s and prioritize flexibility. These are also sometimes called boundaryless organizations or horizontal organizations, where we have a lot of cross-functional and self-managed teams that form and reform as needed, and so we don't have a lot of vertical structure here. There's not a lot of bosses. These are self-managed teams that form as we need to do different projects or come up with new products or services and might reform as it is. This is for quick responses, rapid cycle time, things like that. But if we have automated processes or outsourced processes, it may not work very well. It can be challenging because leadership and questions about management, when the hierarchy is kind of gone, can create issues, or people don't really know how to make that leap necessary. Network structures are about a lot of outsourcing. Okay, so we keep in-house just our very central competencies, and then we outsource everything else pretty much. And we use information systems really broadly to make sure that all of our partners know what's going on. So this can be very cost effective, very flexible way of organizing, but it can cause problems because you don't necessarily have as much control over all those elements that you've outsourced. And if something goes wrong, it can really affect your organization. That's just an example. Okay, the front-back structure is a combination. It's a hybrid structure where you have one structure that operates on the front end and one structure that operates on the back end. Banks sometimes do this. That's the example in your book is Citibank. So we have customer facing on the front end, product facing on the back end. And this is helpful for the customers who want a single point of contact or a single contract for all of these different product types and don't want to be shuffled around to each, different rep for the different products. Um, it allows you to present kind of solutions or systems rather than all these individual products, and you can bundle products easily. With just a product structure, the different divisions might not know the other products all that well, might not be able to sell the other products, so a customer would have to go to each division to get what they want. So it can be beneficial, and you know more, you get to know your customers and your customer segments pretty well. But because the front and the back have different goals, it can be hard to actually implement this. You can get some power struggles or some conflict between the two. So it has to be managed carefully. Okay, matrix organizations. Matrix organizations are complex. The organization has two perspectives, and it can vary what those two are, but they're equally important. And so employees report to two managers. So if this is set up really well and those managers are on the same page, sometimes that can work. But often you get, or sometimes at least, you get managers that might be telling an employee to do different things. Well, how do I prioritize? Both of these people are my boss. Who do I know how to listen to? So there's role conflict, there's power struggles that can be a problem. I posted a little video on Blackboard that talks a little bit more about the matrix structure if you want a little more info on that. Okay, so on page 106 and 107 of the printed book, I know some of you guys have online books that have different pages, but it's table 4.1. It lists the advantages and disadvantages of all of these different structure types. So you should be aware of those and be prepared to talk about, what might be the kind of compare and contrast the advantages and disadvantages of a couple different structures. All right, so how do we know what kind of structure what kind of structure we should use? So, how are we going to maximize using our resources? A functional structure really helps with economies of scale and sharing resources, but if we have a very complex organization, it's not going to work. But, just creating a complex design for the heck of creating a complex design can waste resources. So we need to balance that. How much specialization are we going to need? In each of these departments, divisions, units that you're creating, how much is that necessary, and how much duplication of positions are you going to need across those things? You can outsource some stuff, like with network organizations, to try to get more economies of scale, because the people you're outsourcing to do only that kind of work, and so they can do a lot of it and do it more cheaply than perhaps you could do in-house. Measurement and control issues. Measurement is more complicated in some structures than others, so that's something you want to be aware of. Control can also be more complicated in some structures than others. How does it help you develop your employees, use your human resources to the best of their ability? The way you structure encourages your employees to gain expertise with different foci, focusing on different things depending upon the way they're structured. And then how does it affect the output of the organization? Are you creating kind of natural divisions or unnatural? And is your organization still responsive to competitive demands? What do your customers want, and how can you deliver it to them in the best way? The other part of structure is span of control, or the layers in the organization. As we eliminate layers, we widen span of control, which means more people report to each manager. And there are pros and cons to flatter or taller organizations. There has been a push really to eliminate really tall hierarchies in a lot of cases, that some layers of management may be unnecessary, but eliminating too many layers can be problematic as well. Flatter organizations do tend to have reduced costs because they have fewer managers, more autonomy and authority distributed to the employees, so more decentralization, and more rapid decision making. Taller structures are better for employee development. Managers can be focused on the day-to-day operations, whereas upper level managers focus on strategic priorities. So there are advantages and disadvantages of both. Okay, this video is about Morningstar, and we'll watch this in class and talk a little bit about their unique structure, which doesn't quite get to the level of holacracy, but borders on it. Okay. Your book covers the factors influencing span of control, including employee experience, employee independence, managers' competence and delegation, diversity of responsibilities, interdependence of the work, the complexity of the work, the predictability of the work, and then how geographically dispersed team members are, how much team members tend to turn over, and how dynamic is the environment, how much change is going on. So all of that would help you determine whether you want a narrower or a wider span of control. That's covered in some detail in your book on page 112. Okay. Then the other part of structure is who has power, who can make decisions. Is it distributed to all employees, or is it centralized more towards the top or at the headquarters of the organization? So with a highly centralized organization, we can create standard processes so that, all divisions of the organization basically do things the same way, which makes it easy to process information and, get things done. We can operate and enjoy economies of scale, and we may be able to encourage shared knowledge and trust. But if we overly centralize our organization, we might ignore special requirements of different units, departments, or divisions, and might miss what's happening and not be as responsive to customer needs. And so it could be slower to innovate. So there can be problems there. Decentralization, you can be much more responsive to customer needs, much quicker to make decisions, and let a unit pilot something, try something out, experiment. But too much decentralization can also be problematic, where you're getting duplication across units, where certain units may try to use that power to their advantage. So we need to be careful about taking things too far in either direction. We need to kind of balance for the type of work that we're doing. Okay, and here are our benefits and problems. This is taken straight from your book. All right, and then division of labor. Specialization we get from way back with Frederick Taylor and scientific management, and the idea that you can break down a job to do it in the very most efficient way. Think of an assembly line. If all somebody does is, screw a wheel on day in, day out, they will become an expert at screwing that wheel on, and they will know how to do it better than anyone else. The problem with just having to screw a wheel on all day, every day, is that it gets really boring, and you can get burnt out, and just low job satisfaction, and then people quit. So there is a problem with over specializing jobs as well, as under specialization, which you don't get as deep knowledge about any aspect of what you're doing because you have to do so much, so you get a much broader view, and you can get overloaded as well. Okay, so we talked about strategy and structure before. They are intertwined, and your book talks about specifically that certain strategies lean well towards certain types of structures. And again, the choice of your structure should be driven by your strategy. Okay. In class, we're going to talk a little bit about what structure you might want to use for a company. And we're going to talk about Google's. A few years ago, Google shifted to a structure where they basically created a parent company called Alphabet. And so we'll talk a little bit about that and how that worked out for them, and what's happening today as Larry Page is stepping down from Alphabet, and Sundar Pichai, who is was the CEO of Google once Alphabet became Alphabet, is now taking over as the CEO of Alphabet.